Hey, Steve T here from SOFtact Solutions. Welcome back for our fourth episode of Tech Talk Team Room. Pretty good discussions we're going to have today. Two awesome guys that really don't need an introduction, but we're going to go through that anyway. We're here in wonderful Augusta, Georgia in August. It's awesome. And closing out TechNet Augusta. So again, appreciate it. Hope you guys have some comments, listen in. I think the topics that we have today are pretty good, and it'll probably ring home for a lot of those folks that have either recently transitioned out of a senior leader position or have had challenges ever since maybe some years ago. But with me today, I've got Sergeant Major retired Michael Adcox, better known as Big Red. Mike has got, almost 3 decades of special operations experience. Mike and I had many times together in the team room, many times together in the organization. I had the honor of working for him in some occasions, and again, that would flip back and forth. But Mike and I have gone back a long way. Probably no one as intelligent, as well spoken, as collected as Mike had been over those years and even today, which is why today he serves as senior executive or senior client executive for NTT Data. And I think once you hear him speak and hear some of the things he's got to say, you'll agree with me if you don't know Mike. But so, Mike, I appreciate you coming out. I know it's been busy for you guys, so really do appreciate you taking the time to come on out.
Yeah, I really appreciate the invite from the ST team, and you guys really taking the time out to do this. I think that SOFtact is doing this right. I think that the way that you guys are pointing, your conversations is solid listening for the folks that are out there truly looking for some stuff. So I'm excited about the conversations pieces today. I can't thank you enough for the invite, and the NTT Data team are definitely in lockstep with what you guys have at SOFtact Solutions. I appreciate the invite.
That. Yeah, man, absolutely. Again, really requires no intro, but we have with us as well Command Sergeant Major, recently retired, Jack Nichols. And Jack, if you look at the illustrious career that Jack has had, I mean, you go back to the team room days and the soft units, things of that nature. I don't think anyone in our organizations in the past has been as successful and has fleeted up as far as Jack. So Jack coming out of our cyber command, right? Our cyber CSM. Yep. Before that was the Army G6 Sergeant Major. Before that stood up the Cyber Protection Brigade. I mean, the resume just goes on and on and on. Jack is now, recently retired with NTT Data. Jack is the Director of Defense Networks and Cyber Integration, right?
Yep.
That's what you're doing now.
That's what I'm doing.
Well, hey, man, I really do appreciate you coming out again with Mike. I know it's been busy for you guys, busy for your transition, getting into the company. And so, I mean, it's really, really a big deal for us to have you here, man. So it's thank you.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. I look at this as I got my battle buddies with me again. And coming out of the Army just recently, last year with AFCEA, I did my retirement ceremony right after the AFCEA thing. So Friday was my retirement ceremony. The SOFtact team was there supporting, and I appreciate the SOFtact team can let us come out here today. But the thing I'd like to say most of all is just the appreciation of over the 1 year that I've kind of gone through this transition is all the battle buddies that actually reached out. So this has been a fantastic year for me, and a great opportunity to join, the NTT team.
Right on. Yeah. Hey, and we're going to talk about that transition, right? Mike actually spearheaded a lot of things. I mean, he was a mentor for most of us that were after him, and we certainly appreciated all the info he gave us on that. Unfortunately, for guys like Mike, they kind of had to figure things out, especially during that time frame. And so we've got Mike who retired a little bit before us. I retired 5 years ago, and then Jack now. So I think we have some pretty good discussions coming up with regards to those challenges. But first, one shout out to AFCEA, right? A great TechNet venue here, TechNet Augusta, closing that out. I think at least for SOFtact Solutions, probably the best one that we've had. The most opportunities, up to date information. We've got a lot of battle buddies that are in the Gordon footprint now and serving here, and had a lot to say. So fresh information, a lot of new technology, a lot of new innovation. The Army's doing some great things. So for us, I mean, it was really a really good event, and so enjoyed the week. Pretty exhausted, right? It's been a busy one. Mike, what about you guys for NTT Data at your level, at that senior client executive level? What did you get out of it?
I think this particular TechNet really did a good job of having the right people at the DoD level and the Army level here, and the information that they were putting out is sound, and I think they're now starting to elaborate on their true pain points and issues for industry to truly capitalize on and assist them throughout. I thought that the speakers and the engagements that they had for this TechNet were absolutely spot on. I felt that they engaged with industry a lot more, in the hallway side of the house and stuff. It wasn't as hustle and bustle as it can be, in TechNets in the past. I felt that they were really in tune with industry this time. We actually had some really good conversations with some senior folks about some serious problems that are happening across not just the Army, but DoD as a whole. And as NTT Data is one of the largest integrators in the world, those are the types of problems that we look to tackle. And it was, I felt, a very fruitful TechNet for NTT Data. I felt that there was some very good conversations that have a lot of potential for follow-up to be able to assist and be true partners with not just DoD, but our Army partners as well. One of the things that I was pleasantly surprised at this time was the small business entity that really came to us and was like, hey, we've heard about you guys. Hey, we're interested in, how do we team up? We have this going on. What do you guys? Is there anything that we can do for you guys? And that was kind of refreshing, because in the past it's been us hunting the small business entity and not necessarily the integration or the interfacing with them to us. And this time it was kind of the opposite way. We didn't have to really hunt down the small businesses, and that was nice to see.
Okay, yeah, that's good stuff. Now again, at your level, especially with the years that you've got in at NTT, I mean, right now, your wheelhouse and your focus is really DOJ, federal. I mean, it's. So when I transitioned out in 2011, I was exactly, like Jack was describing. We're not going to jump into the transition discussion just yet, but a little bit of story time. I was the quintessential example of what not to do on the transition out, right? And I was very fortunate that I had two battle buddies, John Gary and Ronnie Watts, throw me a safety net and brought me into a fold and teach me how to do things, right? Teach me the business side. Now, I had to hold a fire hose for a long time, man. I'm just telling you, I got some serious scar tissue learning, but it was probably the best thing that happened to me to have those guys catch me, throw me a net out there. And I have progressed, and I've been very blessed with regards to that. Started in the DoD side. From the DoD side, I went over to the DOJ side, took over some significant contracts over there. And then here lately, I've been very blessed to be able to move up. And currently, I am the senior client executive for all DHS, all DOJ, and all IC for NTT Data. Yeah, man, and that's awesome, right? Yeah, Mike's the only one that gets promoted 6 times in a year.
And in 1 year, absolutely.
Hey,
be like Mike.
Yeah, you got to be like Mike. Hey, listen, out there, I mean, again, if you're looking for a credible company with strong leaders, background into the DoD and now DOJ, hey, man, give Mike a call. We'll have his info out there. I tell you what, we've been partnered up as best we can with you guys from day one, and it's an amazing company. Jack, what do you think? Right, this is your inaugural TechNet as a civilian,
out of a green
man.
suiter, right? Yeah.
So how was it?
This is great. I mean, I looked at it from the perspective of like what General Janovic kind of put together. I mean, he looked at it from the intel, electronic warfare, cyber, and signal. I mean, so we had a bunch of persons there representing different elements and different echelons of the Army. The industry side of the house was pretty significant to me based on kind of, I'm new and I'm talking. One of the things I found as a green suitor was to talk to industry, walk the floor, have the conversations with them, understand what they're delivering and what they can probably bring or assist you with in your organization. And coming out of the Army now is realize hey, I need to talk to all these persons. This is great. There's an opportunity to get everyone together. And as we looked at it from the past was that everybody was excited about August. August is coming, and it's the reunion of all the signal folks, the cyber folks, and everybody getting involved. And what I saw with General Janovic asking about it too is how do we get all the intel manpower? Because a lot of the stuff that we do works. It's interoperable.
It's connected.
It's all connected, absolutely. And I think that's one of those things that from my new side of the house, being in the green, out of the green suit, is the opportunities to still speak to the teams, right, and identify, hey, here's some things that I've seen on the outside now. And at one point, you become the guy. I don't know if I want to talk to those guys, but you realize that hey, they're trying to help you, and you see great things. And as I came on NTT, I saw the entire corporation of what it does, what it's delivering, and what supports, but also the partnering that it has with other entities throughout the space. And like I said, that was kind of something that was new to me. I did not know all this, a year ago. And you hear about it. Everybody's telling you about the transition. But I've learned quite a bit from my battle buddies, to include you. I have sit down for about a 2.5 hour talk, and with Mike and all the many others that are out there. And that's the kind of big thing, is that how do you approach the exit? What do you want to do? And most of us give you the shoulder shrug. Yeah. I got to find a job. Give me something.
I tell you, man, for most people, a year seems like just a long time, but it flies by so quickly.
Absolutely.
And to have that drastic of a perspective change, right? It's pretty significant, right? Yeah. And so, I appreciate that. Hey, before I, I got a couple things I took away from some of the panels and some of the things, and it was refreshing to hear something different. And probably the best thing I saw, right, was that everyone was saying the same thing, and it wasn't couched, right? It wasn't like, here's our message and this is what we're going to say. Everybody was on the same road, going the same direction. And so that was one, it's an anomaly. And two, right, I thought that was a big deal. But before I get into that, got to thank, our marketing manager, Joy Barr. Yeah. She puts these things together. She takes care of us. I'm typically bothering her by, hey, where's the next podcast? Hey, where are we doing this? Hey, we got 4 more, so you need to schedule these. And she's doing all the running around and taking care of us through the TechNet and the conferences, and gets all this stuff set up. So thank you, Joy. We certainly appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But back to, the meat of the conference, right? And so when I don't know if you guys sat in on the ACM or the PEO panels, right? The key kind of out of that and talk about scar tissue, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we were all together, obviously we were a bit spoiled in some cases, right? Especially during major campaigns and things of that nature. And right. And so you didn't want for a lot. And the acquisition process, let's just say, was quite streamlined.
Liberal.
Liberal. That's a good word. I like that.
Liberal.
And then, as you broach out, right, you come out, you hit, maybe it's the Cyber Protection Brigade, right? You've come out a couple of times and, we're working here and there with the Army. Certainly, right, in your Dell time frame, right, when you're working with the reserves. You realize that acquisition process, the 85-step process that it is, right? It really and truly, by the time an idea is realized and reaches the hands of the guys and gals on the ground, it's like a 3 to 5 year process.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a knife fight, right? Getting in, and there's just palm cycles and PBACs and SOC reps and all these things that go in that a lot of the vendors on the outside, if you didn't grow up in that world, man, if you're coming to sell something or coming to introduce some sort of innovation in fourth quarter, There's some challenges there, right? Yeah,
Right.
I mean, we've got to kind of help you out with that. But in TechNet, this conference, I heard a lot of the same thing: rapid acquisition, rapid fielding, and hey, again, kind of like the Cape sets when you were
Right.
back at G6, right? We don't need to field 10 million pieces of kit for the entire Army, right? Let's focus on this division. Right now it's
Right.
4th ID with Next Gen C2.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And you know what? We'll figure it out. And then, when the next division comes up, it's probably going to be different kit.
Right. Backwards compatible.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And they've got a methodology, right, with regards to here's how we're going to do it.
Right.
Colonel Mack, right? Colonel McDonald, Scott McDonald, great brief, right? But he said some things that again, I believe he's right. It's a little bit scary, right? Hey, we're going to break some stuff while we get this stuff done.
Right.
And we'll just come back and fix it later. But the idea and the objective is to get the kit, right, the leading edge technology in the hands of the soldiers. And so when I heard the PEOs and I heard the ACMs saying the same thing with the same process and how they were going to get it done with the same vulnerabilities and risk, I was sold, right? I'm like, here we are. That's awesome. What do you think?
I think I'm not as optimistic, to be honest. I think I think it absolutely falls in the category of Murphy's Law 1. I really do. Again, I think that at the leadership level, I think the plan makes a lot of sense. Where I think this particular plan is flawed is at the MIC level, right, and the MIC interaction, and at the legal level, right, because the lawyers are going to get involved in the acquisition process. They're going to, and I think that the MIC level of interaction has been a deterrent for years. It has been a stopper for years. And the problem with that, we just had a conversation at the GO level, 2 hours ago. And that was a topic of conversation. Legitimately, is that your acquisition strategies are getting better. Your desire to go faster is on point. The problem with it is that it's everybody that says no to you, and then you can't fight through the no. And that's your acquisition shops as well as the legal aspect. Your acquisition shops, and this is my point that I made at the GO level, is your acquisition shops do not correspond and they do not correlate with the primary stakeholders' responsibilities and requirements. They don't. Your desires as a commander don't necessarily meet up with their desires as check-in blocks for getting contracts completed. They don't coincide. So when that starts to happen, it's always a battle, right? We want to do a time and materials contract. Nope, that's not a time and materials contract. It needs to be a firm fixed price. Why would I do a cyber contract for firm fixed price? It doesn't make any sense to me because I need expert level that has fluidity in it. If I need assessors, if I need, pen testers, that's a fluid type of position at an experience level. And then what ends up happening is that there's a battle, which 9 times out of 10, the primary stakeholders lose the battle. Sometimes they lose it in a frontal assault, and sometimes they lose it at the very last minute of the battle when the acquisition goes out, and they're like, what is this? This is not what we're asking for. And then they have to live with that as it's delivered, as we're bidding on it, as me and you are bidding on it, going, that's not what we talked about with the primary stakeholders. That's not even close.
Yeah, I tell you, man, that's hard to argue. How about that? Right? I mean, that's I don't it's not often I don't have much to say. It's hard to argue that point. And optimism is a good word. I guess for me, because you're right. And I believe there's going to be sustainment challenges. I believe that there's going to be contractual challenges. I believe that there's going to be those things you mentioned. Yes. I guess for me, it's, we've got some folks sitting in the seats at the right time.
True decision makers that are making good decisions.
Right. That are bringing the folks together.
Right.
So that when's the last time, right, you saw, this team at the GPF level, right, rowing the same direction?
I can't say since the time that I retired in 2011 that I have seen that.
And so that's where, I have like high hopes.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's funny that we're talking, right? Like it's all leading to it's all about the money, right? That's what this is. It's the money. I'm a big Bill Maher fan, right? And so did you guys see General McChrystal come out on that?
No.
Okay, so did his thing with General McChrystal, obviously asking all the questions and all that stuff, but posed a question at the end was, hey, if you had the authority today, and you were king for a day, you can change one thing about the DoD or the Army, what would it be? And most folks knowing him, right, and all the things that he had done, whether you're a fan or not, doesn't really matter, right? And pretty damn good, he's the man, right? He came out and said the acquisition process. That's the first thing that I would change. And again, right, whether you're a vendor, whether you're an OEM, whether you're someone coming out in the industry, if you don't understand the POM cycles, and you don't understand the acquisition process, and you don't understand, right, how an idea becomes reality, and leveraging where the funding comes and where it flows, then chances are, right, you're going to be spinning your wheels a lot. But no, dude, I have to agree with you on that one. You kind of poo-pooed on my thing, but so thanks. That's awesome. Jack, I'm hoping for you to come out and
I look at it,
have my back, man.
No, because he's right. I saw it. I watched it, but then the other thing goes back to that rapid fielding. What is rapid fielding? I mean, you're going to rapid field the 101st. It doesn't mean the 82nd is going to get it now. A reserve unit might get it before the 82nd does, right? Just depends on where they're at on the deployment chart, right? But the other piece, but I always kind of saw, and I watch it from a different perspective, is like, my commanders, those commanders are looking to get the right equipment for the service members, to get them out there, to get into the fight, right? And be very productive at what they do and be lethal. But the other thing that was missing was kind of the education on all that stuff, right? So I'm getting all these great things. So, you look at the schoolhouse. Can it keep up with all this? We talked about cyber. Well, you got to have cyber experts. We talked about these communications. The three of us sat through a course for about 6.5 months, 7 months that trained us on all the things that we currently use in the Army now. You think about the SHF, you think about small dishes and, these different wave platforms and wave systems. That was kind of the, what I watched it was like, I was bringing it up to somebody the other day. It was like, well, they were talking about radios and fielding these radios. And I said, it'd take us 10 years to field those radios. And it's because the acquisition process, right? Sometimes it's the industry side. You can't make enough of those radios. So you can't deliver it fast enough, and it goes back to like who's making them sometimes. And there's also the piece of, what do you really need? So, if I looked at range control, did it really need a radio that does encryption and all the other things that the high-speed radio I'm jumping in with has? So sometimes it was kind of like, do you put a lot of money into that, or do you shift some of that to kind of deliver somewhere else? And so you're looking at it, like we talked about the acquisition thing today, and it's also giving, what we're writing. So as the military guy doing it now, looking at it from the other side, it's did we write what the requirement was correctly?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And again, in typical Mike fashion at the geo level discussion today, I was asked, how do I fix this? And what do you think's deficient? And I said, as the DoD, as the government, you guys suck at defining requirements. You suck at defining requirements, and you leave it subjective. There's ambiguity with regards to what you're truly looking for. And then what ends up happening is you have all the vendors that are ultimately trying to shake their magic 8 balls and figure out what the hell you truly need. And what ends up happening is they actually start giving you what they want to give you. That's what happens. And you're not getting what you're supposed to, what you need, what you truly need as a requirement.
I think that's like, so again, right? Mike and Jack just poo-pooed on my shit. But no, I mean, the deal is real. I think that there's two sides to that. In some cases, right, man, I think you mentioned it, right? From the academia education level, on the DoD side, can it keep up with the pace of technological advances? And the answer is no. It never really has.
No.
Today, and I don't want to get, all technical and involved in it, but I mean, we're in the throes of quantum.
Right.
We're in the throes of AI algorithms. We're in the throes of technologies we've never seen or operated before.
Right.
And so to be fair, right, if you're a G6, J6 commander or otherwise, How do you write a requirement for that? You have no idea. We saw that with cloud, right? You
Still
were
see-
in during that
Still
time.
seeing it with cloud.
You're still seeing it with cloud, right? It's hard to understand and identify what your absolute requirements are when you don't absolutely have it all figured out on where it should be integrated, how it should be implemented, right, and who should be using what.
So let's pull the string on that for a second.
Oh, here we go.
Let's pull the string on that for a second.
There we go.
Right. So I don't blame the DoD for that in 100%. Right. Because industry historically, the last 25 to 30 years has normally been in front of, from a technological standpoint, of those types of things. That they're able to push faster, acquisitions are faster. They're able to use a lot more R&D dollars to do things. Now the military has come a long way with their R&D structure and doing things, right? But what I will tell you is what needs to happen is there needs to be realistic, transparent forums when you're seeing ahead. Cloud just didn't happen 5 years ago, man. You know what I mean? It wasn't 5 years ago. AI, quantum physics, or quantum side of the house, it didn't just happen just a few years ago. That's happened a while back from an industry perspective. What I see that's deficient in that, and that whole math problem is that from the government perspective, you're not prior planning and having those industry discussions to assist you to get your strategic level planning efforts off the ground so that your component levels can actually start planning off of your strategy. And then ultimately, when you are able to buy something or be able to get it in a palm cycle, you're ready to go, not knee-jerk reaction going, okay, I got to do cloud, move everything to the cloud. How do I do that? You're not funding me to do it. What am I supposed to do? I don't know, but you need to be there by December. It's November. And then what happened? Knee jerk. We knee jerked as an entire DOD, and everybody lifted and shifted if they could, and everybody's moving, and we even tried to create an agency to assist. And then what happened? Hey, man, I can't afford the bill on this. Holy crap. If I touch this stuff, that's expensive. Yeah, moving it to the cloud was cheap and it was easy. Awesome. But I can't touch any of it because it cost me millions of dollars to gather that, to use that data, right? As soon as I touch that storage unit, it's like the cab meter.
So, and Jack, you jump in on this one, right? So I agree. And typically, right, we've seen, especially now on the industry side, the DoD is a little bit behind in some cases with regards to the advancements in the industry world. I'll go back and, we had discussions with it, I think, on our first podcast, and I'll use Rob Flaker again, right? Hey, Rob, the DoD operates in constraints and restraints, right? Constraints being things you must do, restraints being things you can't do. And somewhere in the middle is where industry's got to be, right? And here's the reason why. Sure, cloud was there 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? Quantum has been around for quite some time. This race has been going on. But none of that ever touched the DoD network. None of it was stigged, right? And so on top of the fact that yes, I believe everything you said is correct with regards to what DoD should probably look to do for prior planning, which is why we're hitting quantum so hard. But at the same time, right, the policies that have been in place for 30 and 40 years that essentially, right, disallow the DoD to go out and get a startup company to do certain things, to be at front edge, right? Because it can't go on a DISA network. It can't go on a DoD network. It can't touch anything. That's like, it restricts them from being at the front edge. And so who revamps that policy, right? Who's got the rose pinned on them for that? Because you had to deal with this.
But as you described, is the policy writer, right? Who signed the policy?
I don't know.
And I've watched the leader say, well, why does it say that? Well, I don't know. Change the policy, rewrite it. Let's figure this out, right? So I think that's the problem sometimes. It's who do I get to change the policy? That's what I've watched over the past,
But
right?
as we counsel on policy, right? We're hiring a lot of smart people to assist and counsel.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? With regards to better ways to do policy versus, well, I think it should be this way, right? Back in our day, in the early days, that's how policy was defined, right? General officers and officers themselves and senior enlisted be like, I think it should be this way. make it a policy. And the next thing you know, it's a policy. Everybody's starching stuff and buffing stuff, right? And then we changed it again. Now there's no starch and now there's no buffing, right?
It's a
So it's a policy,
change,
right? Because that's
But
where I think it should be.
But who's the signature authority? That's what I find all the time. Who can sign off on it to change it, right?
But we go back, as we use cloud, and we'll jump into AI in a second, right? With cloud, the biggest concern realistically, I think, was who owns the data? Who owns the data? Who can touch? Who can see? I'm not touching that, right? Well, who's advising who at the decision maker, policy maker level? Who's making those decisions? Who's assisting you to get there from industry, right? There's a lot of industry folks that are in the DoD. There's a lot of industry folks that are actually consulting for the DoD. But with the DoD side of the house, that process is, man, we are moving at the speed of smell, not the speed of sound with those decisions. As where industry can, they can take a little more calculated risk with regards to that. But one of your perfect analogies is we're doing this in the banking industry. Yeah. Everybody's all about protecting their money.
Exactly.
I know
right?
when something's touching my
exactly
money. I know when
right.
somebody cash it at the ATM.
But they don't operate in that fine little space between restraints and constraints. And I go back to
But who defines that? Who defines those constraints and restraints limits?
You know, Mike, I'll be honest with you, right? Almost 40 years of military experience, right? Well into over 2 decades, right? I got just about 30 years in. 30 years. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
You just came out of non-positions. You can't tell me.
Well, I watch it, right? It always goes back to, we looked at the certificates, right? Get your certificate for Sec Plus, for instance, and then you have these, these certificates to get the test, right? And you can go take
your
the
vouchers.
Test, your voucher, right? But then we have a whole bunch of them, and I say, well, we can't use them. I'm like, why? Because they didn't take the class. And I said, but they're getting ready to expire. Can we give them the person? My policy says we can't do that. And I said, but somebody can go to take the test. We've got people that have passed before. All they need is the voucher to go take the test again. Policy says. And then so, it's like, well, golly, how do I find somebody to sign off on this, right? Change it for me.
So again, right, think about it. And it's the industry's large, right? I mean, you're talking about in this room alone, almost 100 years of military experience. Mm-hmm. And to this day, right, you can't pin the rose on one single person that can change policies that would widen the aperture and allow the DoD, right, to be out front of technology and test appropriately.
I think it's the entire policy machine. The perfect example is what you just stated with regards to the acquisition strategy, right? The PALM cycles. Okay. How many years have we been talking about a rapid acquisition streamline type of opportunity
30.
For at least, right? At least.
30.
At least. So where that aperture, who opened that, right? And how did we get there? And then where was the trust level of being able to do that? Because I can tell you now, if I was king for a day and I was sitting in the Pentagon, that would be concerning for me, right? Because you're going to worry about every risk factor. Is this going to get abused, right? Or is industry? Is it going to be nepotism? Is there going to be improprieties? You have to look at every angle of that, right? And that's where I say that the acquisition shops and the legal side of everything that the DoD does is ultimately some sort of hurdle. Not saying roadblock, but it's a hurdle.
Right.
It is a hurdle because those are the no folks.
Yeah.
They are the no's.
If you want something fast, they hold on to it for a long time to continue to validate.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I watch.
I need another study.
So
we need to call so-and-so.
So here's an interesting thing as I sit here and I listen to you guys, and I love talking to you guys, right? I miss you guys.
Same.
And if I go back 15 years and we're all in the same team room, it's the same conversation had in a different way.
Yeah.
Like, why in the hell do I? Why are we still using this crap?
What's the pub say? What the pub say? The pub say. Don't change it.
Even simpler. Is there anything back in the unit that you could buy without a Form 4? Not one thing. Right. But I guarantee you, if Steve, Jack, or Mike needed to go get something from Radio Shack, that's how old we are, to go to Radio Shack and get something, we could have went faster and gathered that component just to drive down to Fayetteville and back.
But Mike, the flexibility we had then too is we could make it ourselves.
True.
We
That's
did
true.
it, right? So we
That's-
can go buy it at Radio Shack.
That's true.
And then we were able to fabricate something.
But
and
you
we
couldn't buy it
present it
without a
to
Form 4.
industry, right? And then we
Yeah.
present it to industry. Make me some more of these.
But my point
I
was-
needed that Form 4 with 3 letters or 3 justifications.
But that's my
Where
point.
can I-
You couldn't buy it without a Form 4, right? So that process drug my Radio Shack trip out considerably because I had to get 3 quotes.
Yep.
I had to get the deputy commander to sign off on it, right? And I get the talk from Ronnie Watts about red shoe, blue shoe. You know what I mean? And everybody, a lot of guys have been around that knows what we're talking about. So you get that. That's where realistically for a component, any of the 3 of us could have the fast track
Right.
could have went and bought the exact same component. Bring back, here's a receipt.
But again, right, an ever-growing, ever-challenging problem. I
It
mean,
is.
and different perspectives. You know, as that maturation process goes on, and you go through your careers, and now sitting outside the industry. But it's interesting to hear we're still bitching about the same things in a different way. And I want to use that right to segue into something where I think, again, just as critical as the acquisition process is to get the right tools in our service members' hands, right, that saves lives,
Right.
is the mental stability, the mental health assurance, and that confidence that a lot of us didn't have going through a transition. And the way I want to do that is, again, almost 100 years of military experience, right? And again, I'm Jack and G6 Sergeant Major. He's a man. I know for a fact, right, even after all those years in SOCOM, right, and not talking bad about the things that we did or how we did them, right, it was the use of SOC G6 Sergeant Major position at the core level, right, with the large contracts and dealing with 357 and all these things that, where I got just enough, right, to understand the bigger picture and how the Army functions, where the acquisition processes are, how they operate, how it all ties together all the way down to fielding, right? And I would offer that had I not done that position, I'd have been absolutely lost in the position I hold today. Now, it gave me just enough confidence to understand what was being said around me in the room, right? But coming out, right, from 30 years of this is how I do things. I know everything in this environment, right? I'm the guy. To going into a world that I'm not the guy. Matter of fact, I'm the dumbest guy in the room, and I was typically the dumbest guy in the room anyway, right? And so
Fake news.
the
Not
idea
true.
was
Not true.
is I had just a little bit of confidence from understanding the language, the verbiage, and what it tied to, right? In all the years that you had served and all the positions you held, especially in SOF, right, all the tier 1 side, how much of that prepared you for, one, the challenges of transition, right, and going into the industry where you could just take off and run, and did those experiences, right? I mean, did that facilitate your 8,000 promotions? And I mean, what helped you or what hurt you? What do you think?
It was that was a painful transition. I was the quintessential example of what not to do, no doubt. I retired on 1 November 2011, and I was working on the 2nd of November 2011, right? And I went to work for Dell. Like I said, John and Ronnie threw me a safety net. I had no plan, man. I had no plan, right? I was in a really bad headspace on the transitional time frame, right? There was a lot of stuff going on from the military perspective, and with the selection process and all that kind of being new at the sergeant major level, and at the time the command was not willing to bite off into that because they had significant concerns that, nothing against the guys from general population, very capable people, but they just weren't ready to allow a guy from 10th Mountain to come in and ultimately command the unit. They were, or be the CSM. They weren't willing to do that. And, at the time, Sergeant Major Ferris kind of went into it. He told me point blank, we're going to do a 2-year hiatus, right? And we're going to freeze everybody right where they are, which, for Steve Long, that was probably one of the most heartbreaking things he ever had to hear, right? Because he got extended where he was. And Steve did a great job with regards to the task that he was given. For me, I was already in a kind of a weird headspace anyway, because I had been removed from a troop sergeant major and I'd been there for a long time. Right. And I mean, it was all about the fellas. And for all of us, I mean, living for the fellas was the best part, in my opinion, of my military career, being with the fellas. And I loved C Troop. I came up to ops and I felt that I did the best I could possibly do as the ops sergeant major. And I felt that I was 100% prepared to go be the JCU CSM. Right. I felt that I had earned the right. I felt like I had been in the right positions and that I had the knowledge. And I also felt that I had the fellas backing to be that guy at that particular time. And it just wasn't in the cards. Right. And like I said, I wasn't in probably the positive headspace that I should have been. And, and then, talking to the boss, the six at the house, maybe it's time. I'll be honest with you, Steve. I knew it was time probably about a year before that.
Yeah.
I knew. I just couldn't come to the grips to actually make the decision. And it's funny because, Jack invited me to a graybeard session with the sergeant majors here at TechNet, right? And this was, kind of what we're in the topic we're getting ready to talk about now. And I used a cliff analogy, right? And I took a water bottle and I took the water bottle and I said, this is every one of you right now. Every one of you, right? Whether you're ready to retire today or 2-3 years from now, it's still you. Either way, you're either stepping off that cliff or the Army's pushing you off, but you're going off that cliff. There's no way around it. And as you look down, whether you're stepping or getting pushed, it's dark. It's dark down there. What you have to realize and what you have to prepare yourself for is that when that fall happens, which that part right there is the scariest part of the fall, right? It's like going off the ramp right before the hill happens, right? If you've prepared yourself for that and you have figured out a way to have an understanding of at least a little bit what's going to happen, that fall into the darkness is not nearly as scary. What most of them don't realize, there's a net in that darkness. There's a brotherhood, whether it be sergeant majors, whether it be people that you worked with, whether it be the community, there is a net down there. It's just how you utilize it. I was very fortunate and blessed to be able to do that, but I didn't see it that way initially. And when I came out, I was still Big Red. I was still that guy. And let me tell you what, going into the civilian sector, geared up like I was as Big Red, it's not conducive for civilian management. It is not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's terminology that you use with the fellas, as terms of endearment that civilians don't really find as endearing, right? And it could get you in trouble. But
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure I answered your full question. I mean,
you did, right? and I think you hit it home on that last statement, right? And the fact is especially in the communities that we operated in, your language, your commonality between peers, the folks that you've been with for the last 10, 20 years, right? How you engage or how you interact with one another, right, is typically inappropriate in a civilian setting.
On that setting.
Yeah. So and then again, if you're in charge, right, with folks who, let's just say, are not familiar with where you come from, chances are, right, it doesn't go well.
What I was really ill prepared for was the business aspect of the job that I took. Right, I took a PM job at a reserve unit on Fort Bragg, and there was a little over 60 people on that contract. The herd and the cats factor of that I thought was easy. I mean, that's like platoon sergeant stuff. This isn't hard. The business aspect of that, I felt was a everyday challenge. It was a learning curve every single day, right? I mean, I had to hold a fire hose on what's a gross margin, what's a revenue, what's a contribution margin. What do you mean I can't give that guy a raise? Well, because the rate won't allow it. Well, the guy's doing a great job taking care of the fellas. That's not how business works. That's not how that works. And having an understanding of that, having an understanding that there are people that have jobs like HR, talent acquisition. You're not the end all. You're not the sergeant major. Nobody cares about that. In that world, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm not saying it doesn't matter in the fact that what you do and the impact you had, that absolutely will matter for a lifetime. In the current position that you're currently at, you are not the sergeant major. You're the PM. You're the engineer. You're the vice president. You're the whatever you are. It doesn't matter if you're at Lowe's doing the wood department. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, there's requirements for that position that you are required to do, and there are parameters that you're supposed to do it in. And there's expectations always. And it took me a long time to learn how to get to those expectations without accepting failure. That was tough because guys like us don't do failure.
Yeah. Jack, I mean,
No, I look at it what he said there with expectation. It's expectation management too, right? In my mind, I never got what I really wanted. That's how I felt in JCU, right? When we were there, kind of doing our thing, well, I want this. Well, you're going to S&T. You're going to do training. Well, I don't want that. I want C Troop. Well, and I go in there, you're going to D Troop. It's the thing. But, Mike, you highlighted something that was about the personalities. It was the three of us were different. We accomplished the same mission, and we did it well, but we went about it in different ways.
Yeah.
And personality characteristics. But we were assessed for that, right? So as you describe it, we stayed in SOF for a long time. Then I wanted JCU. It didn't happen for me. But we had great leaders out there that kind of identified the opportunities for people that, hey, sometimes you got to let it go. If I looked at old Abrams charter from back in the day, I was supposed to leave a long time ago and go back out into the Army and do great things. And that I didn't initially, right? But then somebody kind of set the path for me to go out there. And as Mike also described, it goes back to what you have to change. I'm going out there to set up the, cyber, and I don't have a lot of experience in cyber at the time, and they said, assess, get the right people. Now you're assessing, you're looking at packets, you're looking at all these things, you're trying to get the right team, build the team like we had. And that doesn't necessarily scale. And the divisions and corps and bringing in all that manpower, that's a lot of people to go through and kind of screen and to get the right people that you want. But as I kind of continued to move forward, it was I was like, well, I didn't want that position either. I would have liked to have had this, right? And so expectation management, man, it's like, well, I wanted this, and you do your interviews and everything else. And then, you don't get the job that you interviewed for. You're like, I suck, man, expectation management, man, and I got something that was probably better in the end, right? So it was always kind of that thing too. It always worked out. So, about 6 years ago, I was thinking, well, I was in the Army G6 and I was like, I'm retiring after this, man. I'm done. I'm done. Carlene, my wife, and I had made this decision that, hey, if it's more than 5 miles or 5 hours away, you ain't doing it. So 3 to 5 hours, it was going to be either Fort Gordon or it was going to be Fort Bragg or the Pentagon, right? So it was kind of the decision we made. And I picked up something else and to interview, and I didn't want to do it. And then Carlene kind of gave me, or General Isaacson wrote it on the board. And this is kind of the expectation stuff, right? He's like, who do you know at these companies? We wrote out several companies. We talked about the John Garys. We talked about all these other ones that are out there, right? The guys down in Tampa, AC Coley and crew, all these names that we knew. And you put those things on there and you're like, all right, would those guys, help you out if you're in a bind when you're all done? And I said, possibly. I would hope so, right? And he goes, and why don't you just stay in? And I was like, I want to go do what they're all doing. So expectation management. I decided to interview, and I got the job to come down here. And then I'm looking at it as I'm going to be the 50-something-year-old guy getting out of the Army looking for a job. All my buddies have done this for like the last 10 to 15 years. And so, I did the Army piece pretty well, I thought, right? And I understood it. I was comfortable with it. I probably should have paid more attention to acquisitions and everything while I was in. As I look at it from the perspective of now, you're like, well, holy smokes, I should have done that because everybody's talking, PM, you're going to be a project manager, you're good, But you're thinking about managing people in the sense of the Army. Well, that's not what that is. It doesn't align to that, And so, you got to get your PMP. It's all this, well, it doesn't really align that way. It changes when you're getting out. And so when it came time for me to get out, and which I did a year ago tomorrow, coming out with my retirement ceremony, it was expectation management. Once again, I had a plan. I set up my plan. I briefed it, briefed well, as Mike likes to say. That briefs well. And I got to a point where I'm getting ready to go do this job that I had set up, and politics changed, and so the position that I was going to get went away. There's no position there for you. So then I was kind of in the middle of well, what do I do now? I've been working all my life. What do I do now? And it goes back to having to find, make a different resume, And, Mike kind of presented this to all the sergeants majors this morning, says you can't just have one resume. You got to have several resumes based on what you're trying to, what job you're trying to go for. But the problem, like as he highlighted as well, what job do I want? I don't know. It's like, it all sounds great. There's a sales job out there. Okay, I think I can sell stuff, wheeler and dealer, and then you get all these other things. Like, nah, I don't really want to do that. And then, somebody said yesterday, you got to find what you don't want to do, right?
Yeah.
Find out what you don't want to do. And so I didn't even know that, right? So then for me, it was the transition. It all worked out in the end. But at some point there, I felt like I was a bit lonely, right? Because there was the point where I just kind of came out and the phone stopped ringing. I don't get any more emails because I'm off the gal now. And I want to know who's getting selected for whatever. I would like to see what was going on. I like to know, that somebody shot me an email and see how I was doing. But that doesn't exist anymore. My phone number changes, right, based on my office number and everything else. And so nobody wants to bother you. But you're kind of alone, and out there and just kind of doing things on your own. And I remember like working in my shed. I had a lot of time out in the woods. I was folding clothes and, I was doing all this stuff around the house. It was like stuff I don't normally do, but, I'm home now. And it was kind of lonely, right? I got me, the dog, and the cat, right? And they're passing by, But before, people used to pass by the office and have a conversation with me. Before, people would stop and we talked for about an hour. Before, and so on and so forth. And so it was lonely. And, you want that phone to ring. You want somebody to call you because you're kind of like out there for a little bit. You're on the, what am I going to get for, maybe my disability? What's my pay really going to look like? And am I going to need more money as a retiree? What do I need? So it was all those things that, people always talked you through it. But now you're in the foxhole now, man. You got to kind of fend for yourself, and you're looking out, and that's kind of how I felt for a bit there. And then, but what I found was reaching out to that safety net that Mike described, right? I fell the cliff. I'm in free fall. I got the terminal velocity and I still hadn't pulled, and I'm coming into 5,000 feet. I need a pull, man. I need to call somebody. And, Mike reached out, you reached out, and my friends were all there. And I just didn't really put it into perspective as like, sometimes I could have probably called them too, and they would have had the same description. But what I did find is that everybody else felt the same way. Everybody else felt the same way.
So I think that's key, right? And maybe because we all came out in different positions. We came out in I don't know, at different levels and things of that nature. And so one of the things that it's true, everybody goes through. That rites of passage even, right? I mean, and it is lonely. And there's depression, and then there's the identity crisis, and all these things are happening at once. And just like you said, right, I got to find a job. I got to have what do my taxes look like? What do my bills look? All those things are happening at once. And so when I sat back, I mean, it's been 5 years since I've retired, right? And what I would offer is that I still have lows, right? I think you're seeing them up front, and I think you'll continue to see them for the foreseeable future. But if you remember when we were all moving around, but we're still in green suits, and it didn't matter if you were back in the community or out in the bit larger army, you were a phone call away.
Right.
I mean, I was at USASOC at Fort Bragg right after coming back from Fort. I called Jack once a week.
Yeah.
Hey, here's what we're doing at USASOC. Hey, I need this. Okay, sounds great. So you didn't necessarily see each other every day in the team rooms like we once did, or we go up to ops and hang out and this, that, and the other, and get ready to deploy and do all this stuff. But you still had that connective tissue because you were all still serving for the same purpose, right? That network still existed. For me, at least at the time, I left in COVID, right? And so DOD was desolate. I mean, everybody was just working from home. Lonely took on a different word. Or different meaning, man. I mean, already going through those peaks and valleys, already falling off that cliff, as you had mentioned, right? I was ill prepared to understand a lot of the business and the industry, right? I was okay on the contractual acquisition stuff,
right?
Enough to be dangerous,
yeah.
But I had so much to learn, I go back to like probably the first few meetings I had coming out, right? And most people don't realize, like when we talk about titles, and you got a title, I got a title, everybody's got a title, but that's a title.
Mhm.
That's the position you're serving in, and it's the function you provide the organization. When you say sergeant major, right, that's not a title. It's who you are.
It's a distinction.
Right? And if you've done that for the last 10 or 11 years, everyone you've associated with, everyone that you've mentored, everyone who refers to you as sergeant major.
Right.
The day you get your flag, you're no longer sergeant major. Right? When you walked in a room, and I saw it, right?
Mm.
You'd walk in an auditorium. Everybody just, sergeant major Nichols. When you used to walk in, right, to the briefing rooms or walk in down to the team rooms, same thing, right? When I was a CSM, it did the same. I mean, and it's not ego, man, right? It's reverence, it's respect, right? You don't have to prove anything, right? It's something you've earned over the years, and it's your identity. When that goes away, and now you're, I don't know, subservient to the person you put through selection, right? Or that 25-year-old that, I don't know, just got out of college is now your boss, right? As your prime contractor or otherwise, right? And they've never even heard of you. Oh, yeah. Did you used to be in this unit? Like, yeah, a little bit. Little bit. All of those things come crashing down quickly and at one time. And for me, I would offer that. Although, again, another safety net, right? Sam Anderson threw me a safety net. So I didn't necessarily have to worry so bad about finding the job quickly. And like you, day one of terminal leave, I was at work. And I don't regret that one bit because I needed that, right? I needed that camaraderie. I needed that purpose in life.
Let you keep that regiment
yeah,
going.
Yeah, but I didn't do that, right? I did the complete opposite. I took what everybody else's advice was, you need time off. And I took the time off, but it was too much time.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? I knew that if I went down that road, man, I wasn't going to make it.
Right.
I needed that piece and part. And unfortunately for those around me, whether it was my closest friends, my family, my wife at the time, right? They didn't understand or realize, right, that there were days that I just was not me. I mean, I was trying to figure out who I was, what my purpose was, how in the world after 3 decades do I reinvent myself? And I would offer that quite frankly, there's plenty of help out there, and folks who don't have our community friends, folks that don't have friends for life, and those folks to lean on. There's help out there for those folks, and they need to get it, right? But for me, right, I had you guys. I had Blake's. I had Sam. There were times where I was broken out like a shotgun, man. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And those were really, really dark days, and it impacted, right, all the personal pieces and parts of my life. And so when you look at, and again, we'll go back to what you had started off before in the expectation management you were talking about, right? Nothing prepares you for that.
No.
So what would your advice be? I mean, how do we take care of our own, right? Because there are a lot of folks that don't have that safety net. And quite frankly, man, they're becoming statistics. That's the truth.
I think one thing, at least I can attest to, I absolutely suck at staying in contact. Doesn't mean I don't love you anymore. I mean, one of you guys, it could be, I couldn't see you for 5 years, and you would call me, hey, Mike, I need your help. Where are you? I'm on the way.
Yeah.
Right. But that contact, and it doesn't have to be an everyday, like, hey, Jack, what are you wearing? It doesn't have to be those emails. Right? It doesn't be them texts, right? But what he does, like, hey, brother, just check it in, man. And I mean, and that's one thing he's way better at, right?
He always has.
He has been. Right?
He always has been.
Buddy check, buddy check, just checking in on you, man. Like, oh man,
push-ups.
I'm glad to hear, man. Holy shit, I'm glad to hear from you, Jack. I mean, and then next thing you know, it's like, I didn't want to talk to you for 4 hours, Mike. Good Lord, it's like,
but it's reaching out.
But it absolutely is, right? And I will tell you that the TechNet Augustas, the soft weeks, that type of stuff I don't know that is necessarily enough for a lot of us, right? Because you went from a lifestyle and you went from something that's ingrained to you as a brotherhood for decades, and for some of us around the same brother for longer than a decade. Right. And those are family members, period. They are family members. And when you start losing pieces of your family, because I tell you, when I transitioned out, man, it was a black curtain for me. I did not reach back. I didn't reach out. I encapsulated myself. I did. And I encapsulated myself into work. And that was about it. That's all I did. Right. And I was working 14 hours a day again because that's what I knew. And I immersed myself in this new job it was given to me, man, just shy of sleeping on the floor, getting stuff done. And that's not how you run a civilian contract. It's not. That's not being a good leader. That's not being a good manager, right? That's an extreme. And I immersed myself in that. And here's where the impact really got me is that, my wife, Kim, told me, I thought you transitioning, getting out of the Army was going to be better for yourself and for this family. And it wasn't.
Nope.
And that was a flashbang grenade, man, for me. It was, where did you lose yourself and your priorities in that transition? Where did that happen? Well, it didn't happen in the transition. It happened in the preparation of the transition because I convinced myself that I had to be a certain way to tackle the transition to get out of the military, right? Well, what I didn't realize and what I didn't surround myself with people that were already out going, hey, jackass, you're doing the same thing that you're doing in the team room. You're not a troop sergeant major anymore. All you're trying to do is transition as a troop sergeant major or as an op sergeant major. That's not who you need to be. And that's really not who you are. And it's not who I wanted to be. It took me a long time to figure out that you think you're razor sharp. You still think you're in an operator capacity and you're doing all of that, right? And you're doing the best things that you could possibly be doing for your life today. It was counterproductive. Let go of that. You're not the sergeant major. You're not the operator. You're not anymore. Let go of that and look at the person that you need to be for the next chapter of your life. That took me a while to get there.
I would offer, man, that I think it takes a lot of folks a while to get there. And I don't necessarily know that there's ever an FOC for that. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's a yearly struggle. It's a daily struggle. It's a challenge. And again, there's still highs and lows. And I would offer that the soft weeks and the TechNets, and you get all the brothers together. It's you don't want it to end.
Right.
And then you go back and you're dispersed because you're in the industry. And like you said, right, we're not talking to each other every day. An opportunity comes up and we talk. Maybe we're in town and there's a reunion and we talk.
Right.
But it's those gaps in between, right? Go back to reinventing yourself. What is it? Where are you finding your peace, right? What's keeping you grounded? What's keeping you sane, right? What's keeping you whole? For me, right, the outlet I have is hunting, right? And I've been able to do it with our brothers, right? Mike Adam and Tim Renfro. We just got back from South Africa, right? I mean, that's my outlet. And so people will say, well, man, you can't hunt 9 months out of the year. Well, yes, I can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you have a relationship with that? Well, that's kind of a difficult thing, right? So how do you balance your personal life now, right? You think you got the industry and the business side figured out. You reinvented yourself as a businessman, understanding where you need to be and how you need to do it, but you still got to balance. And I would offer it's even harder now, right? To balance all those things and your personal life and keeping your worth, right? Before you could hide everything behind a deployment. Hey man, this is my mission, right? But your job, our jobs are not 24/7, right? You're not getting called at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, right? We're not getting called in, right? Pagers aren't going off, right? There's a lot of time that you've got to fill, whether it's with a significant other or a hobby that you have.
Right.
You got to find something, right, that keeps the purpose, right, that keeps you happy. And I tell you, it's been a struggle, but my thing has been, I'm in the woods. That's my safety space, right? That's my safe zone.
I would say that the definition of what you just described is what was the actual transitioning trigger for me is that I stopped performing for everybody else and I started living for me and what made me happy. And that was family, like you said, hunting for you. It's golf for me, and I like to get out and I like to walk. I put my earphones in, and it's not necessarily whether or not I'm doing well at golf or not. But it's that segregation, that separation of all. There's still stressors, man. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not that retired, right? We all still got bills to pay and stuff.
Yep.
But I mean, ultimately, I will tell you is I stopped living to satisfy other people's needs. You know, the military side, the work side, and I put me and my priorities and my family first. And if everything else is an interference, then it's not worth the time or the effort. And that includes the job. If the job overtakes me to the point where I can't be where I need to be, if I can't be there for my girls, I can't be there for my wife, I can't be there for my mom that lives in Tennessee, then something has to change. And that's always going to take back seat to what is making me whole, because it took me a long time to get to me. It took a long time to get there. And I'm not giving that up.
No, that's a good point. I would tell you that you know, you balance all these things out, and I know you're trying to figure out what that looks like now, especially as Katie's growing up and doing her thing
Moving
and
out
all
of the
that
house,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, you know, I've been able to spend, I mean, 3-4 times the amount of time now with my grandkids.
Right.
Right, and so if I'm not in the woods doing something, man, I'm with the grandboys, and that's my happy zone. Right, I can just sit there and watch them all day fight each other, and I'm the happiest guy in the world. But those are the things, right? You said it: family, right? Purpose, something that takes your mind off the stressors, right? And at the same time, right, challenges you, right? Physically, mentally, things of that nature, is something that kind of helps.
Yeah.
Where are you now? I know look, a lot of guys don't like to talk about this stuff, right?
No,
You retired when?
2011.
This is the first time you and I have talked about the challenges that we've had in transition. 2011, dude.
Yep.
Right? I've been retired for 5 years. And so, Jack, right?
I'm more of a
Spotlight's on you.
yapper. I'm more of a yapper. I talk to you guys, right? I reach out to you. My thing is exactly what you're describing you didn't do. I'm the opposite. I'm calling my friends, seeing how they're doing. What you doing, man? What's up? You know, what's next for you? And like I said, most of them are still in the military or they're not, right? And what are you doing? What's up? And that's kind of how I balance it. The other piece is my girlfriend, Carlene, right? My wife, she's my best friend. She's always been my best friend, she's always kept me in line. She's always made me smarter. And so it's, going back and being home with her, right? Because I was doing the Geo Bachelor thing
for a long time,
right?
Man.
And so it was going back and then coming driving back every weekend. And I did it when I was at the Pentagon. I did it when I was at Fort Gordon. And, staying and living in Fayetteville, she stayed there the entire time. My daughter, right? Katie grew up. I remember coming here to the CPB, coming here to CPB, and she was like this tall in one of the little pictures. I think she was like 6 years old. And then, it's like kind of sad to me now because I'm back home now, and she's almost 20, right? Or she just turned 20. And, so I watched her grow up on the weekends. And then, so I wasn't there for, Mike was very, very good with the girls and, attending and games and everything else. He had retired and had the opportunity, flexibility to do that. And my life and choice was to continue to be away. And, and there's like the times where I should have quit way back. Like I said, I did an additional 15 years on top of a retirement. And, opportunities were presented several times. What are you doing? Friends reaching out and, what are you doing? Come on, man, we're going to bring you over here. And I liked what I was doing. I liked the military. I was comfortable with it. And, I enjoyed doing what I do. As Mike described, you kind of the leader. I enjoyed that. But then I also put that to, my family second in a sense, But the thing is I was going home every weekend. And any commander I had knew I was going home every weekend. Even during COVID, I was going home every weekend. And, I was like, well, I'm making one stop. I ain't going to touch anything. And, I'll just make it to my house and I'll turn right back around and come. And, my leaders were supportive of that. But the thing for me was like I used to watch like the older gentlemen, the teammates that would go to the Hardee's at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we used to laugh about it. I think Todd Spencer, I do hobbies. And
the big veteran hat.
I made him a veteran hat, had all his pins on it and everything else, had his rank, and I said it's for Todd going to the Hardee's in the morning at 05, right? And then I understand why they do it now, right? I understand why they do it because they can relate. Anybody that comes in with a hat that says some division, wherever it may be, some Air Force organization, wing, flight, whatever you want to, some ship, you have discussions of there's a commonality that you would have with
There's
that
camaraderie with that.
Yeah.
Camaraderie, yeah.
And you can talk about the basic training. You can talk about yeah, I saw that ship. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And everybody can sit there, and I see them every morning. And that's what they do. So for me, it's the reaching out to those teammates to have a conversation, see how you're doing. For me, it's also if I reach out to you for 2 seconds to just make the text, and you guys, you just said it. I send it at Thanksgiving and Christmas every year.
Yeah,
And
Jack's always been that guy, right?
I sit
He
there
has been.
At phone book.
Yeah.
No,
At phone book.
it's 4 hours of
Yes.
sitting there to everyone. Hey, and some of them are, don't get me, they repeat. If you respond to it, then we start chatting like, damn it, and I got to go all the way back to where I was, but it's, if I'm thinking about you for 2 seconds, hopefully, if you got something going on, man, you reach back out, have the conversation with me. I'm open to that. And I found that people were doing that with me too. I think I started that because General Gallagher did it. Right. So Pete Gallagher would send hey, Merry Christmas to you. And I was like, oh man, he's a pretty senior dude calling me and hit me up. Hey, I'm all excited, because like I said, right, because he's a leader doing it to you, right? He's sending it to you, and that was like, so it was kind of like even getting out of the Army, giving the personal notes to people, hey, thanks for everything you did, and it was for me getting out. I didn't have that anymore. Even when I was in, I was always I do hobbies, and I make things for people. I know what Mike likes. I know what you like, and I would make you something unique, right? So now for me, it's my church, right? So then my church, I was like, I'm making things for my battle buddies over there, and the population has changed, right? I've never worked with them, but they're teammates nonetheless, So I've got that, and that's what I've seen over the last year as that transition and coming right off the edge and cliff there, and and was reaching out to those friends, and then everybody said, I was there too, Jack. I felt the same way. It's gonna get better. And I thought like, no, there's no way, man. This is horrible. I feel like crap.
I'm scared. Hey, and that's what you got to say. You got to say I'm scared.
You're scared.
It's scary
right?
stuff, man.
Because it's like I've always been the provider, and then my wife, Carlene was like, what are you worried about? She goes, you're getting a retirement check. She goes, there's nothing to worry about. You're still making money. But I've always been a provider. I've always worked. But now I'm at the house and I've got a lot of time. And as Mike says, you got a lot of time and you need to get out of your head. Get out of your head. And I think that goes back to what you were describing about, some persons have it a little bit harder.
So everybody's experience, I think they have the same challenges, but they handle them different. Their personal lives are different. Everybody has their own challenges and drama in their internal. I mean, so how you deal with that could be different. I think that, and I'm glad to hear, right, that in your transition, right, for the struggles that Mike went through, the struggle and things that you're doing it right. And so hopefully, right, you don't have the peaks and the valleys. I know Mike and I ran into each other one time. I came back from Fort Campbell. Mike had just been on the job. As a matter of fact, got promoted. Talked a little bit.
Yeah, always.
Talked a little bit. But I could tell, right, Mike was going through some shit.
Yeah.
Right? I could tell. You remember that? Yeah. You remember that? Okay. And unfortunately, right, I didn't, I was doing slating, right? I wanted to sit and stay with Mike.
Right.
Hey man, give me a call, whatever, let's talk. And then I saw him years later, right? I mean, but I could tell he was going through a rough spot.
Right.
I will tell you that everything that we've talked about, right? Here's a couple of things, and some of the stuff that you and I had spoke on early on. But I'll go back years ago where Chris Ferris was talking about these challenges, right? And all of us were, just coming into the Sergeant Major world, all this other great stuff and going through the academies and all that stuff. And you would sit here and listen to Chris talk about the challenges of transition, the challenges of reintegration. And you understood it. And you appreciated what he was saying, but there's just no way you could possibly fathom, right?
Right.
The reality of that. I mean, being scared, right? You're never scared, right? You have all the answers. You had no answers, right? You had no job. You had no, you have no purpose.
What's the purpose, right?
I mean, all these things you're facing at one time. And so when all that hit, he was one of the first people I thought of, like, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
That's what he meant, right? I would offer, and you had mentioned it before, with everything that you had learned before, the things that you did as a leader. We remember you did. We were all, together. We talked before, and you said something, right? And I think it's the perfect analogy. We were institutionalized.
It's like prison.
Like being in prison.
Right.
Right? And how comfortable are those folks who have done life terms, right? If you give them the opportunity, hey, you're free and clear, like, no thanks, buddy. I'm going to stay right here. I'm an important
king of
man
the yard,
here, right?
man. I'm king of the yard.
I got it.
I've got purpose.
Yeah.
I've got rank and file structure.
Yep.
I know my routine every day.
Yep.
Right. And I absolutely am control of everything within my universe.
Things are provided.
Yes.
So like prison, like an institution, and I don't mean to say that if you join the military, you're in prison.
Just for the
But-
record, though,
but-
there's nobody at this table that's been to prison. So let's just put that
That-
out right
that's-
now.
that's-
There's nobody at that table.
At
that's
least
been to
not
prison.
documented.
Right. Exactly. Allegedly.
Allegedly. But like that analogy, you mentioned the sacrifices you made to do the things that you did. You didn't get to see Katie grow up every day.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Well, if you're institutionalized in something we've been talking about,
Yeah.
you miss your kids' lives.
Absolutely.
I would also offer, right, that, different from that institution, right? We all made the choice when we joined the communities we were in to put that community and our brothers before our families, right? That happened to all of us.
Right.
We all had kids at different times, but, our kids were all pretty much within. And it's hard, right? You go back and you'd like to say, I have no regrets, right? But when it comes to the kids, right?
It's hard.
It's hard. And it still hurts, right? I mean, it's good to talk about this stuff, which is why now I'm an awesome freaking grandfather.
Well,
Right? Because I'm reliving everything through them, right? Like, hey, you got what? Oh, yeah, I'll be right
You
there.
need money?
It's the two things in this universe you can never get back are words and time.
Yeah.
Right. Words and time. But what you can do is with your grandchildren, right? You can't spin that sundial back, right?
No.
And put somebody else in something in a place. But what you can do is that you can slow the life cycle down to a point that, smell the roses a little bit, right? Slow things down. You're not so busy making a living that you stop living. And that's where we all were. In the military, we were so busy making a living that we stopped actually living. And what I mean by the living part it was that conscious choice that we made, that brotherhood, mission, everything else. I'm volunteering to go wherever, right? Because Steve broke his big toe and he can't go. So I got you, brother. I'll take that deployment, right? When I probably should have let somebody else take that deployment and do the living part. And it's very hard to do that. But on your institutionalized analogy is the difference between prison and what we did as an institutionalized mindset is that we constantly volunteered. People in prison are not volunteering to stay in there.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. And again, I go back to the analogy because when you leave that institution, regardless of which one it is, right, unless you're surrounded by the folks who were there with you, it's hard to have those conversations with other folks who didn't do it with you, which again, right, was something I had to reinvent and relearn in the industry now.
Well, not just the industry. Me and you just had a conversation not too long ago. I mean, actually talking about, coming down here.
Right.
Me and you had a conversation with regards to, the people that are around you, right? If it's not those folks that have lived, eaten, breathed your environment, right? To talk about your environment is a null and void. It's futile, right? Because
Had it last night.
yeah, exactly right. Because you're having this conversation. Yeah, exactly. You're in Texas and you're surrounded by people that you love and friends and family and maybe even townsfolk that you knew when you were small. But to talk about your institutionalized world is null and void. And in your mind, it doesn't make any sense to have that conversation because you already know that either one or two things are going to happen. They have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Or I'm going to have to explain every single acronym, and this is going to take 2 hours to have this conversation. So either way, you're not going to do it. You're not, hey, Steve, tell us about your time in the military. Hey, man, it was great. I met some really awesome people, got to do some cool stuff. How's your family? What's going on in your life? We deflect that like that if it's not the brotherhood.
Did you know Sean Smith? He was in the 82nd.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you get to.
Did you know so-and-so used it for Bragg?
Exactly right.
You have, I don't know. It's like I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's huge. They don't realize that division is pretty big. And what's Fort Bragg look like? Well, yeah, my son's over there. As you're talking in the airport, to your point. I mean, it doesn't scale.
I
right?
tell you that this topic of discussion, right? And I'm gonna hand it over to you first, Jack, on this one. Start closing this out. There are a lot of tentacles, right? When it comes to when you know it's time, right? You'll know, and that's the other thing, right? Everybody always told me, like, you'll know when it's time. When that time comes, there are so many things that have to be done and so many things that don't have to be done. Things you should worry about and things you shouldn't. How best to prepare yourself for the life you've been working to have, right? Truly, and sacrifice to have. But it's scary.
Yeah.
It's emotional. Nobody wants to say they're weak. Nobody wants to say they're vulnerable, especially in the communities that we grew up in, right? Especially where we started off, right? Man, that just doesn't happen. But you got to talk to someone, right? You have to lean on your brothers. If you don't have them, right? There are entities out there. There are folks who have gone through the same thing that are there to help. You coming out now, Jack, and again, I really do appreciate the time you've taken today. What would you tell those folks, right? That are right there. They're just realizing that it's time. The Mike Runks of the world, right? What message do you have for them, right? What guidance do you have for them? And what advice would you give them as they're still in that position, in that institution, and looking forward on what's next?
Well, it's kind of like what I described. It's you tell people that the voice of reason. What's the voice of reason? There's a whole bunch of persons going to tell you, Jack, you should do this. You should do this. And then the conversation, even like with Carlene, was like, there was a conversation. It was the no, if it's beyond 5-hour drive, right? You're coming home every weekend. If you're further than that, I don't want to deal with it. Because the Army's going to continue to give you something. As I was in there, they're going to continue to give me something. Even toward the end there, I could be in a different position right now had I interviewed. It's just the voice of reason told me, no, you're not interviewing. So it's the conversation with the spouse, the family. Carlene wasn't sold on me going to some of these other positions toward the end there. She was not. And I remember having the conversation with her. We were getting ready to go on a cruise. And I had already done my interview. And she didn't want me to do the interview. I did the interview. I was like, who knows? I may not get it. There's no chance, right? I'm not going to get it. Rolling the dice. 4 other persons. And I'm on the ship. We're getting ready to pull out of Miami. And I get the phone call. And they said, you got the position. You're moving to D.C. And she was not happy, So we're going on a cruise. We're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to be happy. The family is all happy. Her family, they're all with us. It was going on a wedding. Carlene was not happy. And, I felt so bad. I was like, I let down my best friend here. She told me she didn't want me to do it, and I did it anyway. So there was, like, how do I make this up to you? But the conversation for like Mike type thing is to have the conversation with the spouse, right? You have to have this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to concede to these things. And, it doesn't always work, and that's what I've kind of watched. It's the what I used to always hear about persons, with your family, the Army will continue to move on. I came out of my position and somebody moved into that position and it continues to churn, man. It's moving. And it happens every year. We talked about all these things early on about like kind of the leaders are doing these kind of things. Those leaders change every 2 years, man. And it will continue to move and it continues to progress. And you get a really good one here and there, you get a really, really good one here and there, right? And, it will continue to churn. And, so when you're looking at it, it's like, my conversation with Isaacson, I don't want to be the 55-year-old guy looking for a job at the end. He's like, there's going to be people on the outside. He's like, yeah, you're right. You brought up something about the family and not being there. And I look at some guys with the numbers of, combat deployments they have and how much time they spent away from home. Like, my gosh, man, you're young, And then, I look about for the time that I was deployed, and, Carlene was pregnant with Katie, and I had to get back. And the team said, you should stay 2 more weeks with us. We need you for 2 more weeks. And I'm like, yes, I'm staying 2 more weeks, right? But my family has a say in that, right? And once again, it goes back to my voice of reason, which is called Carlene. She says, no. She goes, you better be back here for this baby, And I didn't even think that way. I was like thinking mission first, Not that my very first baby is going to be born and I want to hang out with the team because they need me. No, now my wife needs me. So when I look at it like for the things, it's like, what do you like? Do you like the military? I had a battle buddy that's sitting at this table. Say, get out, man. Should come out and do these things. And I just remember having a conversation. I said, I like what I do. My family's good with what I'm doing. And there's a lot of opportunities out there to make the money. I watch everybody, And I remember we were down at Soft Week, and we were all on the stairs. And I believe I was the only one in uniform on the stairs.
That's right. Yeah.
And somebody says, please, somebody get Jack a job. And I felt horrible, right? Because I felt like, I'm just hanging on, right? No, I want to do, but I felt also successful at the same time. No, I'm doing great things in the Army. I'm happy with it. And my response was, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I like what I do. And Carlene was supportive of it, Of course, I had to, wheel and deal with her. But so as it came to the very end, it was, I'll be honest, I don't think I was really ready to get out just yet last year, and I'm sitting around and, everybody's talking to me about, why aren't you doing this? You should interview for that, man. You'd be great. And then, I was like, felt like, it's like, you see, the generals, most of them are in 36, 40 years. And I'm in that space now, right? I'm as a sergeant major. I'm in 35, 36. If I would have retired, 37 years it would have been. And I was like, I don't know how to do it. And then Carlene's like, no, it's time to get out, And like I said, I don't know if I really knew that feeling. Okay. I kind of felt it, right? And I was like, all right, but it was, like I said, mine was I was getting old. I'm the old guy in the formation now, right? And I'm thinking about like, what we're doing. And, you brought up some things, and I was thinking about these young kids that are coming in and the way we did formations. You got to get hemmed up. And now I look at their digital natives, right? They do things differently. And, they don't want formations. They don't, and again, it was those kind of things. And I said, maybe it's that time, maybe it's time to kind of do these things. So for guys like Mike, it's, do you still like what you do? Is the family comfortable with the moves? Are you in a place where you can move? Because again, if your wife's got, a profession and, she's got to get certification from state to state to state based on kind of what she's doing in her career. I watched some of the nurses. I watched some that, had PhDs and, doctorates, and they, then they have to get recertified somewhere else and, get licensed in another state. The military's worked that out, but that's hard. You got little kids. You got a kid that's getting ready to graduate. You got a kid that's in a good soccer team, all those things you got to take into account, and like for me, Carlene never moved. She never left. Katie went to the same school her entire growing up years, and, Carlene stayed where she's stayed at the same job. And we made it that way because I said 3 to 5 hours. That's all I want. If they would have gave me something else, I would have probably got out a long time ago. And I think that's kind of what you got to kind of make into consideration is if, they're going to do the separation thing, you got to figure that out, man. Does it work? I would submit, and Mike and I have this conversation. I got a really strong relationship with Carlene, and it's you got to have a lot of trust, man. And again, that's where I find sometimes that people ask me, "How did you do it?" And I said, "It's hard." And I said, "But you got to have a lot of trust." And for the guys like that, if they want to do that, it's the family has to have a say. And sometimes we don't always agree. But you got to kind of submit to, supporting that.
So that's a pretty good description of like what you said, right? Where you live for your family, right? You start living for your family. And that switch, right, ultimately towards the end of that illustrious career, right? Yeah. You're putting the family first, and maybe the family decides it's time for you to go. I think your experiences are a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
In that aspect, I don't think everybody has that luxury of everybody's relationships are different.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, but I appreciate it, right? I mean, hopefully guys like Mike Ronk and all those folks that are on the cusp of, it's time, it's this, that, and the other, hopefully they take your advice, right? And they're talking to their families and they're finding out, right, what's best for the family and how to put them first.
And you're right. I mean, I like this, it's the other thing was, as I look at the industry partners that are out there, they'll be there. They'll continue to be there. The other piece is having that plan, even getting out, we described that earlier. What is the plan on exit then? You're here, but are you ready to just go off yet? Or are you, like Mike said, you're going to have to get off it eventually,
Right.
But are you ready for that? Or, is it a few more years,
I think a big problem with that timeline, right before you get the feeling, you probably already have the feeling. You already know that's not really the math problem. The real math problem is coming to grips with you actually pulling the trigger, flipping the switch, and making that actual conscious decision to do it. What I will tell you before you get to the feeling, or as you're starting to get, the butterflies in the stomach about retirement, and we've done it this week, and I really appreciate Jack, putting me in a position to talk to a lot of senior guys that from an experience. I think it's very important for you to give back, right? I really do. I think it's very important for us to give that knowledge. I've got a lot of business scar tissue learning, a lot of transitional scar tissue learning, but I will tell you is that one of the things that kind of is a benefit for me is like we did, this week, is being able to sit down with some sergeant majors and being able to say, look, I asked maybe Jack, 15, 20 guys, maybe, the same one question, you're thinking about getting out, you're thinking about transition. And I asked Mike Runk the same question. What's your worth? What is your worth? And of every single person that I asked that, they had no answer. So how do you jump out into that darkness?
Right.
If you're not educated enough with your own worth to know what to expect as you're doing the free fall, understanding your worth, understanding what you're good at, what you don't want to do. Like, I don't want to sell stuff. I don't want to do this. All of those are the things that once you decide to put you first and Big Army second, you have to start planning for that. You have to start planning. What is my worth? What do I want to make? What do I want to do? Is it a good life balance and work balance for me? Those are the things that as you start defining those, that list, like you described, Steve, starts getting a lot smaller and it becomes way more important. And now there's only 5 or 6 things on that real list that actually matter.
It actually matter,
right? And when you can focus on a list of 5 or 6 things, we're probably all micromanagement list makers, right? Whether it be your head or sticky notes, or would be like walking into, damn Steve Long's office. It looks like a sticky note factory blew up in there, right? But it was this system. And if you have those checks and blocks, and those checks and blocks are very small,
right, and
you're checking them off, that's accomplishment to the goal of getting to the cliff and then preparing yourself to jump, right? Versus getting pushed.
Right.
And I think ultimately, if you're able to do that, define your worth, figure out, use your network, figure out how to do that transition more successful for you, right? You're going to struggle. It's going to be scary. It is. There is a network. We've harped on that this whole podcast about there is a network out there of brothers and sisters that are willing to help you, give you advice, handhold you through processes if need be.
Right. The
only person that can make that fail is the individual not having enough fortitude to reach out. That's the only way you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Is if you don't reach out and get assistance, right? Because if you try to go that shit alone, the statistics will tell you that's a long road to hoe.
Well, it doesn't last very long.
It does not.
And the statistics show that as well. Hey, listen again.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
I look at it too as like, we talk to all these people here, right? But we're all still kind of doing the same thing. We're still in the industry, right? So the other piece was like, what else is there to do, right? And it's like, I've seen people out there, they're ranchers. I've seen others that gone out and, they're
ski instructor.
Right.
Yeah.
Scuba instructors, they're just RVing across America right now, So there's all these opportunities. And like I said, sometimes it's just like, it doesn't have to be the industries as we know it.
Right.
And, I just recently, we had one yesterday that he was, he's a city councilman. So completely different, thing, but he used to be a communicator. And then, watch one that, he was, raising his pigs and everything these days. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But there's somebody in the network that is doing that, right? So again, it goes back to you just reach out to these guys. They'll talk to you.
Yeah, again, man, I really, that's a good point, Jack. And I really do appreciate the time. Again, I know how busy you guys are. NTT Data is getting after it, supporting all facets, and worldwide. And so again, thanks for coming out. Certainly thanks, right, from your perspective, right, at the levels that you've sat at and where you're coming at now. And Mike, even beforehand, we've seen each other back and forth in the industry and out. And so certainly appreciate your perspective on it. Hey, listen, this topic of discussion is not like you have a discussion that goes away, right? There are so many folks out there that have either lost their way, have lost their network, that don't have someone to lean on. And it's these forums, right? Talking to folks that have been through it and folks that want to help others, right? That maybe they can get help with. And so we're gonna figure out how to do that, right? We'll come back together. We'll talk about more how to get through this transition, what it looks like a little bit after. I'll work with Joy here, and we'll figure out. We'll point people in the right direction, right? Folks that are needing that help outside of their network, if they don't have a network, who they can speak to. Get some numbers out there, get those things out there to help those folks, especially right as we get ready to go into the holiday season, right? That's a tough time for a lot of folks.
I think for the follow-up, Steve, I think one of the things that we should do is that, the folks that look at the podcast, in the comment section, right? Hey, put some topics in there, put your own experiences in there, right? And I think, as a panel, as we come back and we do a follow-up on this particular topic, I think we can share some experiences and look at that, right? And utilize what SOFtact has built with this podcast as an opportunity and a medium for folks to share, to connect,
right,
to do whatever. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just this specific topic.
Right.
There can be multiple topics that could spur off of this.
No,
right?
That's a good point.
But I think utilizing your medium and the things that you guys have set up, and you've done a fantastic job with this. And I think it's really got a lot of momentum. I think utilizing that medium and making those comments, on this particular podcast, and then you guys filter and take a look at that and see what kind of feedback you're getting.
Well, no, I appreciate it. And again, interactive, right? And so I think Mike's right. I appreciate that, Mike. Hey, listen, if you're out there, you need help, or you just want to say hello, or you want to make a comment, hit Mike up, right? Hit Jack up, and you can make fun of him. You can talk about me, whoever you want, right? But if you do have a topic of discussion that wasn't hit on, if you do need help, whatever else, reach out, right? Hey, listen, these are the two best guys you can speak to. They'll mentor you. They'll give you their piece and part. They'll explain their experiences. There's a whole litany of folks out there that will do the same, and we'll bring all those folks in. So hit us up at SOFtact Solutions. Again, thanks to Joy, thanks to AFCEA.
Absolutely.
Thanks to NTT Data.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, man. And we'll see you next time.